In the reading corner today, I'm thrilled to be talking to Anders Sparring and Per Gustavsson. We're going to be talking about their books, The Pinchers, incredibly funny stories about a family of robbers and the young boy Theo, who doesn't quite fit the values of his family. Let's have a quick look at the book jackets first so that you can see what we're going to be talking about. They're published here in the UK by Gecko Press, but they are translated from Swedish, as we will find out in one moment. But first of all, let's welcome Anders and Per. How bad was my Swedish there?
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah,
My name doesn't work international. Per, but it's pronounced Per.
Per.
Not
Okay.
Per, like the cat.
I'm used to be called Andrew when I go abroad, so I'm really happy.
Anders, I know that you have written a lot for television, and I've been looking up all the things that you've written. It seemed to me that a lot are based around family. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. But I don't think that that's a choice that I have made. It's more that, like, most things that you make for children are based around families, because that's the normal life for a child. It's like their reality is within the family, and if you work for really small children, the focus will be within the family, and when you go up in age, when they grow, maybe the focus will be outside the family, but the family is still there. So I think it's about the age of my audience.
We're going to see a connection between that writing for television then and also the books that we're going to talk. I know you have an alter ego. You do stand-up comedy as well.
Yes.
Which must be the most difficult job in the world.
Well, I must say it's not a job, it's a hobby. And it's not that difficult. It's all about technique. It's all about telling a story and rely on your story. And it's all about practice. And you don't just go up on stage and try to be funny. You prepare yourself really well. Some years ago, the pandemic stopped my career as a comedian. The key for me was to really know what thematically I was going to tell and to understand what I was going to tell. So it's all about storytelling, I think. And you have to rely on yourself that you think it's funny. Then hopefully the audience will like it.
I guess the biggest difference has to be feedback, and it's immediate when you're on stage like that and can affect the rest of that performance. One moment can affect everything.
Yeah.
Whereas writing a book, you don't get immediate feedback.
No, that's the difficult part. When I write books, when I'm in the middle of a chapter and I find something that I feel is really funny, I usually call Per actually and read it to him and check it if it's funny, because that's what you do in stand-up. You don't go up to the big stage and just do your jokes. You go down to the small cellars, the open mic places, and you test, you try out your thing. And that's what I do with my books as well. So I read it to Per, I read it to my wife, and on occasions I read it to my kids.
So as a writer, are you writing in a way that you want people to be able to read straight off without preparation? It's a demand on you, isn't it, to make them read it the right way?
Yeah, my main focus is on the parent who's reading it loud. And I want it to be easy for them to read. There must be no misconceptions or on whether they should emphasize on this word or that word. I've heard that people really like to read them loud. Also, sometimes I have small jokes that maybe the translator don't understand the joke or the value of the words. And then I need to just explain to them why I think this is funny. For example, in the new book, there's a scene on an Egyptian market. And I have written that there is an old family member of the Pincher family, an uncle, and he steals a pierogi filled with goat cheese on this market. And then my translator on Gecko said, well, it's not likely to be found a pierogi with goat cheese on a market in Egypt. But I thought that the idea of a pierogi with goat cheese were funnier than a piece of bread. So I fought to keep it there. those small details are important for me.
We're going to come back to translation in a little while. I'm going to talk to Per now. You are the illustrator of these books. I was reading your biography. I see also that you are on the Astrid Lindgren jury. So you must have a really big insight into international children's books.
Yeah, I do. I've been a member there for 4 years, and so this will be my 5th year, and we'll start new year for us in Alma Jury in August.
Of course, it's not always given to an author or illustrator. Sometimes it's an organisation or an association, isn't it?
Yeah, it's true. Like this year, a reading organisation in Australia, Indigenous Literacy Foundation.
I was at Bologna to see that award being made, and of course it is the UNESCO Decade of Indigenous Languages. So to have that award at this time, I thought was really great.
Yeah.
I'm also interested in your illustration, and I wondered whether growing up you were a comics reader.
Yeah, of course I was. Yeah. The comics kind of started again in the 80s with a lot of Swedish magazine and new illustrators and comic writers. So I was involved in that at that time. I mean, I made my own comic strips and so on. And I think I learned how to tell a story by making comics in a one-page comics when you want something to happen and there's a middle and there's a funny end. I read a lot of comics and I drew some comics as well.
Because I would make a connection between that skill and the stand-up comedy, the delivery at the end of a comic strip, and so difficult, that last frame to deliver. So I can see some connections there.
Yeah, interesting. I never thought of it that way, actually, but that's true. And as Anders said, it's about storytelling. And that's the big problem. It takes time to solve the problems, how to get to the end with the smartness and some funny things to happen at the end.
The reason why I started doing stand-up comedy was because of writing, and I wanted to, but it wasn't about the last frame, it was about the first frame, how to establish a story as quickly as possible. And so I think that most comic writers has more problems with the first frame than with the last frame. The key is in the beginning, I think. If you start off a story in the right way, then it gets its own motor going up until the end, and you have a few choices how to end it. But if you walk this path rightly, you will find a good way to end it. The problem is to start. I think the beginning.
That's so interesting, really interesting. Per, I wondered whether you like silent movies as well.
Why do you think so?
Well, there was something in the pictures that was reminiscent for me.
Yeah. I think my expression in the picture is more like a silent movie because I have to express the feelings and the funny sides of everything that happens in the story. So in that way, I got the same body expressions as the people that made silent movies, because you have to be very clear what you are looking for. And we have absolutely scenes in the books where you can feel the silent movie comics.
We usually, in every book, we have some place where I say to Per, could we just take out the text and put in a comic strip instead? Because then the reader starts working with the other side of his brain. When they stop reading it and start trying to understand a comic.
And we were talking about Buster Keaton. There was a documentary on Netflix, I think, because it's so much basic humor in the way Buster Keaton works when he's moving that big house on wheels and there's a train coming and he pushes the big house on wheels away from the track and the train comes and misses the house. But then he's on another track and the train comes and it comes from the wrong side, from the wrong direction.
Yeah.
When you're safe, you're like, oh, yeah, they made it. So, you didn't see that coming.
Super funny.
It's genius, though. Yeah. Those films are absolute genius. He did all his own stunts, I think.
What you
Yeah, but
talking about banana?
that's
When he was taking a walk on the sidewalk and he sees a banana, takes a big jump to avoid the banana and falls into a hole.
Mhm.
actually when I went to film school, we had a lecture. There was a Swedish comedy director who had a lecture in comedy, and he used as an example as this is the formula for comedy. I think about that a lot, actually.
Yeah.
The silent movies, they were really good at this. I watched a lot of silent movies when I was a child. I loved short.
Yeah, and I think the covers that are a little bit changed from the Swedish cover. There's new typeface and everything, and it's when I saw it the first time, I felt like it was a poster from a silent movie film. I felt this is like the Marx Brothers.
Mm. Now, I have to ask, how did the partnership come about?
I was asked by our publishing house if I wanted to start a new book series, and my publisher asked me, "Who do you want to work with?" And at that time, we didn't know each other. We have met on a stage at our publishing house where they have something called Breakfast and Books. Anders was the one who was interviewing all the illustrators and authors. And we had a really good time on the stage and we were laughing a lot. So when I got the question who I wanted to work with, I said, I want to work with that funny guy, Anders.
And fortunately, he wanted to work with you too, I assume.
Yes.
Yeah, I was really happy when the publisher called and asked if I wanted to make a book series with Per Gustavsson. There were no hesitation.
It does feel like the books are very much co-created as opposed to written and then illustrated. Would that be true to say?
That's
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, the idea of the Pinchers came up at the first meeting, actually, because the task was to make a book series, and they should be super funny and they should be popular. And at this time, the most popular books for children in Sweden was about young kids who were solving crimes. So we just switched that and we said, let's make it about young kids who commit crimes instead.
If you just said it, let's do it the other way around. And then we invented some terrible, terrible crimes and was just laughing.
But the idea of them stealing each other's socks, for example, came up during that meeting. And also the name, I think, the Swedish name. That they are called the knyckers, which is to steal. We had an hour meeting, and then I pitched an idea for Per and the publisher, and I started working on it. After that, when we do a new book, we meet and we have a discussion about what it should be about, and thematically, and who should be the main character, because it could be either Theo or Ella. And then I start working, and then I pitched a synopsis to Per, and then I start writing the chapter. If you give me input, Per, maybe sometimes I do just the other way around instead, but the input was still something that kept me working.
Yeah. Usually Anders calls me up and read parts of the book, laughing out loud, so I know what's funny or not.
We, at the moment, have two Pinchers books in the UK, The Pinchers and the Diamond Heist, and most recently, The Pinchers and the Dog Chase. At the heart of both of these stories is this Pincher family. I wonder if we could just talk them through a little bit.
Rob Pincher, well, my thought was, now we're going into a universe of robbers, a family who lives in a deep criminality, and we need to have some kind of feeling of warmth inside the family. You can't leave the kids with the feeling that nobody's taking care of Theo and Ellen. My idea is he's a really good father. That's his dramatically why he's there. So we have a feeling they're being taken care of, that they brush their teeth at night and that they get fed and so on and so forth. So he's like the warmth.
That's really interesting too, because what it does, unlike, say, some of the Roald Dahl stories, where the child is isolated amongst these adults that are not very nice to the child, here you have a child who's different, but is still very much part of the family.
Yeah. Because they know if they just give him time, he will become a criminal. Wow, if you just give him love, he will turn up to be a nice criminal as well.
We've got Nick. What should we know about her?
It's important for her to keep the family tradition alive. She's the real mafia in the family. She's much more conservative than the father, and she's really a criminal down to the bone.
Rob wasn't a criminal in the beginning.
No.
He married Nick and became a criminal.
There's a joke around every name in Swedish and also in English. And in Swedish, she's called Mamma Fia, which you can say out mafia.
So the two children that we've talked about, Ellen and Theo. Theo, who doesn't want to be a criminal. Ellen is more in the mould of the family. Tell us a little bit about Grandma.
So the Diamond Heist is actually the second book. So in Swedish, there's a book before that. And I wanted to expand the family. And then I also wanted to get some kind of introspect on the prison. We wanted to go to prison, and who should fit better in prison than a grandmother? And we, since we're working with this reverse universe, we wanted the prison to be a really nice place, because for many children, it's really nice and cozy to go to grandmother. And so now we needed to make the prison a cozy place just because the grandmother was living there. She's criminal down to her bone. She does everything except for violence against other people, but she's been robbing. She's doing big scams. She have cookies that put you to sleep, and she steals cars. She's super duper criminal.
Now, a difficult question for you. If I was to try and convert one of them to being respectable and law-abiding, which one would be easiest to turn?
I think Rob, because he has been living that life a short while, so he knows how it works.
He just fell in love with Nick, and then he became a criminal. So if he fell out of love, maybe met another woman.
You don't think Ellen would, because she's a child?
And... I was thinking that as well. Ellen is a child, and children are, of course, it's easier to shape them, but she's also super criminal down to the bone. The criminality runs women line. It's a criminal matriarch. And
I wanted to talk a little bit about translation, which you've mentioned already. Are there any moments that you can remember where the translator came back to you with things that were very hard to translate?
The English book is the only book that we easily can read and check out how the translation looks like. They have been translated into Chinese, and there's no chance for us to understand what the book is saying.
The names are the most difficult to find, and maybe they don't understand the joke, so we need to explain the jokes. But I haven't found any difficulties. Sometimes I feel that maybe the joke is lost on the way.
It's interesting that so few of the translators send a mail to you, Anders, and ask about things. Because if I was a translator, I would think that it's important to have contact with an author.
There was a very interesting panel discussion at the Bologna Book Fair this year about translation, and the translators were talking about phrases and words for which they could find no translation. And I found that really interesting, because it's in those words and phrases that you are surely getting a reflection of the culture in which those books are written.
I went to a panel where they're discussing a book that I've written, and I have written that a boy went into the woods, Swedish wood. And there's so many words in English for wood isn't the same thing. So it was an interesting discussion about just the word. How am I supposed to explain the bunch of trees and the environment I enter when I go into the woods?
Are pictures universal? Can they be understood by everybody? Or do they also need some form of translation? Are they culturally specific?
Probably in some ways, but I know that I'm happy that they haven't excluded me from the books in Europe, because that happens. Because a lot of people in Europe think that Swedish illustrators are too expressive. Faces are too expressive. They look like too much angry and too sad or something. I even had problems with that. A book that I made also in China, where they sent me a mail asking me, can you do the faces of the kids more pretty or cute? And they were sitting up in a tree and they were horrified and they were very ugly because you're ugly when you're terrified. And I told them, no, I won't change that because it's stupid. But yeah. I know a lot of Swedish illustrators that has been replaced by German illustrators because they have thought that the pictures are too grotesque or expressive.
But part of us opening up the world through reading means giving children access to a whole range of illustrative style. When you look at a British picture book, it looks so different from an American picture book.
Yeah.
You're talking about Swedish as being quite different from German, but there's a European style in a way that is very different to British illustration.
Maybe in Sweden the picture books are super mainstream, but if you read them in China, they are really independent and arty, which will make them less readable. But commercially, maybe it's better to change a little bit to make the readers feel confident when they read or at home.
We in Europe think a good illustration express something that you can't get on camera. Or you have to trust the artistic expression in the illustration. And not everybody in the business are there yet. They don't trust it.
I see you have a little cameo of yourselves in the book. You're not wearing your striped T-shirts for me today.
This is the picture. It's from when we first met Sarah McKay, who took all the press photos for the publishing house. Yeah. We hadn't thought about having masks at that time.
There are so many different ways in which you provide illustration in this book. Some vignettes, some full page, some comic style. What might be going through your head at this point, Per, when you're illustrating, say, something that sets a scene?
When I read the text, I just look at the text. First, I think of what's happening, and then I do a quick sketch for each moment. I think here it should be a picture.
I think that when we started doing the books, the idea was to do something like a step between the textbook and the picture book. So this is like a mixture, and the publishing house wanted to have a lot of pictures in color, so that even the small children could follow the story or like sit and watch the pictures. That prison, we were going to holiday into New York, and then we rented an Airbnb in Brooklyn. And on the other side of the street, there was this small youth prison. So I took some photos of that prison and sent them to Paris.
I suppose one of the things that I think about when I look at an illustration like this is that a lot of the illustrations throughout the book are character drawings, and they appear on the white page or the cream page, as it is with these. And so having illustrations like this really helps to establish where something is happening for young readers. I think scene setting is quite important.
I love that picture because it's good for storytelling. It tells the audience about how small the children are compared to the prison. And it also says something about how scared the guards are really scared, them sitting up here in the tower. And so I think it's funny and it's poetic in a way.
I work with that part of my brain that doesn't have words when I do the picture, so it's intuitive when I make a picture. So
you work from the gut and not from the brain.
That's a really important thing for children to hear, actually, that creativity doesn't have to be something that you have to think about really hard. It's what comes from inside you.
True, so true. I have I have workshops with kids, and that's the part of the workshop. Just do it. Don't think. They think that I expect something from them, something special. I said, I'm not. There's nothing right or wrong here. Just do it. It's fun.
I have to say the colouring on this picture is beautiful. How do you colour your images? Do you do them by hand or digitally?
In the computer. I make all the pictures with pencil, and then I put it in the scanner, and I color it in the computer digitally.
In the dog chase, you introduce a new voice, and that is the voice of Sherlock. What's his name in Swedish?
Snuten is slang for police. Yeah, snuten. So snuten is the word for police that thieves are using. So in Sweden, truten, snuten. We had written 2 books and we had seen Sherlock, but he was always silent and always someone standing there. He wasn't taking part in the stories really. And I wanted to show the audience that maybe the dog does not see what you see, because he's really positive and he does not understand the gravity of the situation where he ends up in the dog chase. He thinks that everything is fine. And there is some kind of humor in that. But I also understood that would make the book harder to read for beginners, because we have 2 perspectives here. So we tried to do something with the text, with the fonts, with the style of the text, so that would tell the audience that this is the Sherlock diary we are seeing.
I love the end where the dogs are returned to their owners.
Yeah.
And he says, nobody owns me.
That's a small homage to a Swedish writer called Åsa Linderborg, who wrote a book called Nobody Owns Me.
It has been absolutely fascinating. I'm going to thoroughly recommend both of the books that we have so far. I hope the others are coming as well. Have a lovely day.
Have a lovely day,
Yeah.
and yeah, nice meeting you.
You too. Very nice.
Bye.
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 Bye.